I'm Chance Storland, and in San Antonio, military means local. This is Military City, a podcast from expressnews.com. San Antonio Express News senior reporter Sig Christensen was embedded with the 3rd Infantry Division during the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003 and has reported on military-related topics for decades. Each episode, Sig and I discuss the military stories important to San Antonio, both from today and the past. Great to be back with you today, Sig. We have another episode, this time focusing on a San Antonio ROTC student who unfortunately no longer has a scholarship. So tell me about UT freshman Map Pescara.
Map is an interesting person. He is a young man. He's 19 years old. In his first year of college at the University of Texas. He's very bright. He graduated from high school with a 3.9 GPA. He was in the National Honor Society. He had a 1260 on his SAT, which is quite respectable if you ask me. And he had gotten a scholarship, a Reserve Officers Training Corps scholarship, 3 years, which would have started as a sophomore, which would be next year, a 3-year scholarship at UT. And what happened was he got the scholarship while everybody realized that he was transgender. Map was a girl at birth and later trans to a boy or male. And so what happened was after the Obama era policy was put on the shelf by President Trump, it was replaced by a far more restrictive one that really made it impossible. It forbids transgender people who are in the process of becoming a male or a female. They have started to transition from one sex to the other. It forbids them from joining the military. Now, there are anywhere between 7,000 to 15,000 transgender troops in the military, we think. That's a fraction of the total. But those people aren't affected by the policy. If you are, however, trying to join in the enlisted ranks, if you're trying to be an officer, or if you're in an ROTC program, you cannot be in a transition state and go into the military. So MAP had already started that process. He had started hormonal therapy, and he had had an operation. Basically, it was a radical mastectomy. And after all of this, the government has taken his scholarship from him, and it's a lot of money to lose. It's over $10,000 a year. And going to the University of Texas for a single year for room, board, tuition, books, and fees is about $26,000. So he's in a bad spot. At this very moment, MAP has a GoFundMe account that's topped over $26,000. He's just short of his goal, which is $27,000. But he's going to make it. The question is, if he stays in the University of Texas next year, going to school on that money, how is he going to finish? Because he'll still have 2 more years to go, and school is only going to cost more. So it's a big, big blow for him. And what we did was we talked with him about what had happened, and we talked to him about what his life was like as he grew up, why he became so enamored of the military. He grew up here in San Antonio. He's a native of San Antonio. He loved the Army. And so he told us all about that. And the bottom line is that this was his dream. And his dream is probably over.
And so, as you mentioned, Sig, you spoke with Map Pescara. We're going to hear a few clips of that conversation today. And here's our first clip.
I really did feel like he led me into a room, turned off the light, and closed the door behind him, and I was just left in complete darkness with just so much, emotional information that I was just beginning to process. I felt like I had been betrayed. I mean, honestly, I felt like, I excuse my, the way I say this, but I felt like I had been screwed over. Like I had met, I had done everything I needed to do. I had talked to everybody I needed to talk to. I had started all the processes for everything that I needed to do. And, it just, in the end, they said, well, sorry, this new policy, we can't do anything for you. Um, here's the door to leave. And they kind of kicked me out and slammed the door behind me.
So what happens here is that MAP is talking with his UT Military Department of Military Science chair, who also was his military advisor, and that is Lieutenant Matthew O'Neill. And they were talking about the possibility of grandfathering his scholarship under the Obama era policy. And what MAP Pascara said was that Lieutenant Colonel O'Neill told him earlier in the month that he could not salvage the scholarship.
So, Sig, I'm interested in hearing more about this timeline and how policy has shifted from the Obama administration to where we find ourselves now under the Trump White House. You've written that losing this scholarship was something that MAP knew could happen. I'd like to hear more about how this timeline fits into when he got the scholarship and then how it fits into that 36 consecutive months prior to joining for the transition. I know this is something that you wrote about specifically in this story.
Yes, and I've written about this subject before. This has been a pretty hot issue ever since Ash Carter, the Secretary of Defense, the last one, by the way, for President Obama, announced that the Pentagon was going to drop the rules that forbade transgender people from serving in the military. And that was the last barrier in the military to fall. There had been Don't Ask, Don't Tell back in 2010. And then only a year before, the Pentagon got rid of its rules forbidding women from being in certain combat MOSs. And so this was a big deal. And what the Pentagon did under the Carter policy was that it actually allowed transgender people to not only serve openly, it allowed them to go and have medical treatment that would give them the opportunity to transition from being a woman to a man or a man to a woman. That involved some money. It wasn't very much, according to Rand. And the bottom line was that these people were going to be able to serve, and it didn't matter whether you were transitioning or not. And what the Trump policy does is that it basically says if you are transitioning from male to female, if you're taking a hormonal treatment, for example, or if you've had surgery, you cannot join. Now there are people in the armed services who are transgender, but those people no longer are going to have access to military medical facilities to support their transition. And so basically the door slams on anybody who has begun the process of transitioning from one sex to the other. And that basically is going to exclude a lot of people. I can't tell you how many, but I think it will exclude maybe more than half. It's going to have a real impact here. And in MAP's case, he had already started that process. And because he had, I think that's the reason for him losing the scholarship. We don't know for sure. Nobody in an official capacity is talking, but that seems to be the thing that makes the most sense. He had started the transition, and they pulled the proverbial rug out from under him.
Let me see if I can make sure I understand this. Is it that he started the transition within 36 months of when he would have joined the ROTC, and that's why they're pulling the scholarship. So if this had happened years ago when he was much younger, it wouldn't have fallen into the 36-month window.
That's correct. You see, the thing is that he transitioned. He started his transition last year. He started by taking hormonal therapy. In the original story, I actually detailed the timeline for what happened here. But he did a lot of the transitioning last year while he was in high school. So he started hormone therapy, and he changed his name legally. That was in the spring of a year ago. And this is around the time, by the way, that he gets the scholarship. He actually got that ROTC scholarship before he graduated from high school. So all of this happens certainly within the parameters of the policy.
What does the Trump administration or what do the people in the military who have to enforce this 36 consecutive month prior to joining ban, what do they say to legitimize this rule? I'm sure they have some reason why they're doing it. Obviously, people could agree or disagree, but what do they say is the reasoning for this change?
I've heard the argument that some transgender people have problems as they transition. They have emotional issues or mental issues. And they say that this also is a problem for unit readiness. So if you're in the middle of a transition, are you deployable? That is actually a big deal. The military has actually gotten rid of people who were not deployable. They've had a real purge of those who had not deployed or who had reasons for not deploying. They've just gotten rid of them. And that's been a controversial policy as well. Because, for one thing, when you get rid of somebody who actually has a specialty that you might need, getting rid of them doesn't really help you. It just deprives you of a person who has a certain skill that you might need. Nonetheless, that's what they're doing. And I think that their argument has been that we need to make sure that every person that's in uniform is deployable. If you're in the middle of being transitioned from male to female, you are clearly not deployable. It's like being pregnant. And when they find out that a woman is pregnant on board a ship, they take her off. They send her home. And that's how it works. There's an argument that they can make for that. Whether it's a valid argument or not really comes down, I think, to cases. And it's not an argument that is going to be settled because the courts are going to be deferential to the military. The Supreme Court was deferential to Trump's policy in this case. I don't think they even really cared what the policy was. The Supreme Court merely, in almost all of these cases, says we're going to trust the Pentagon to make the best decision here, and we are not going to get involved in it.
Let's get now to our second clip, Sig, of your conversation with Matt Pescara, where you spoke to him about his gender identity. Oh, let me do that again. All right. Sig, let's now make sure we can. Sorry. Sorry. Ooh. Sig, let's now make sure we have enough time for all the clips we have for today's episode. Let's get to clip number 2, where you continued your conversation with Matt Pescara and you asked him about his gender identity.
Growing up, I automatically thought I was a male. I had the haircut. My parents allowed me to dress in male clothing. I was obsessed with all of the boy toys, getting them from McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, fast food places. I never wanted the girl toy, and that's who I thought I had been born as a male. And that was, I mean, I started to realize that, I was born female around, I would say 8 or 9. And so, I mean, from the first memory I have leading up to, the 8 or 9 age, I thought I was a male.
Wow. How did you deal with that when you realized that you weren't?
It was difficult. I grew up in a very predominantly wealthy white neighborhood of Alamo Heights, and so I didn't come from the richest family, and I often wore a lot of Goodwill clothes, and so I wasn't able to try to fit in with the other girls to see if, okay, maybe if I attempted to wear, fancy girl clothes, then I would feel better, or I would, feel more normal. Though, I mean, I tried joining the cliques in Alamo Heights and did the whole bless my heart boutique stuff and Nike shorts and Vera Bradley and everything. For quite a while at the end of my elementary school years and, going into 8th grade, that's when I started to try to conform to what people were expecting me to be. And it was tough because I knew that's not what I wanted, and that's not who I was.
So one thing that you find as you talk with Matt Pescara is that he always pretty much sensed that he was not a girl. And this is a common issue with kids who end up being transgender. I don't think most people really understand it. And I don't know that it's necessary to understand it. As you talk with Matt, it becomes heartbreaking, though, to see how he tries to fit in as Madeline Bell Pescara. And it just doesn't work. He wears his hair short. He wears boys' clothes. He's fascinated with the military. He's fascinated with boys' toys. He doesn't want to be a girl. He doesn't even think of himself as one. And then he tries to fit in with other girls. And he goes to the boutiques and he tries to get into the cliques of girls that are in the schools that he goes to. It just is a terrible fit. And if you don't end up feeling immensely empathetic for him, I don't know what to say to you, because this is like he's living a lie as a girl. He doesn't feel at all like a girl. And when he tells me growing up, I automatically thought I was a male. That's it. We all know who we are. We don't have this confusion. Most of us are lucky that we do not have this confusion. We grow up knowing we're male, or we grow up knowing we're girls. I mean, it's that simple. Most of us don't have that conflict. And Matt does. And he has gone and done a really remarkable job of managing his life, going to school and deciding what he wanted to do. But it starts when he's about 10. It starts when he's with his dad and he's seeing all these military challenge coins that soldiers share with them from Fort Sam Houston. He is around people in uniform a lot, and he has people in his family who served. His grandfather, who was in the Navy in World War II. And so he falls in love with it. And there you are. This is a guy who has a real good sense early on of what it is he wants to do with his life. And most of us don't have that either. I wanted to be a reporter when I was 8 or 9, but I was the freak out of all of my friends. I don't think anybody really knew what they were going to do until they went to college. So Mapp is quite an interesting and driven fellow, but that's how it happens. He's in conflict about his gender identity even when he's 8. And by the time he's 10, he knows that he wants to be a soldier.
And then wrapping up here, Sig, as you've already mentioned, Matt Pescara has a GoFundMe account that in just about 2 weeks or so has raised more than $26,000 You mentioned the scholarship that he no longer has was around $10,000 or so. So just doing quick math, that seems to easily cover the first 2 years. Obviously, junior or senior year still might be a question. Who knows what will happen more with the GoFundMe? And you also write that Matt Pescara has found a friend with Representative Joaquin Castro. So maybe there might be some talk in the future about whether this scholarship can come back. You'll have to keep following this story and let us know how this turns out. I want to leave you now with final thoughts about this story, Matt Pescara, and then we'll hear our final clip.
Yeah, I guess I'd say my final thoughts pretty much boil down to this. Matt really, really, really wants to be a soldier. And something about that kind of desire when you've had it yourself. I really, really, really wanted to be a newspaper reporter when I was 9 and 10 years old. I knew it. That's what I wanted to do. And so I feel for him. This is something that he's wanted to do for a long time, and he was on track to doing it. He got a really coveted scholarship, and they gave it to him knowing that he was transgender. He was that good a candidate, and that's why they gave it to him. So without sitting here and taking a position on the policy, I'm going to say, look at the person. Take a good, hard look at who this guy is and why he wants to serve his country the way he does. It's a wonderful thing to see in his heart. He wants to serve his country. He believes in his country, and he's hoping his country will make things right. And all I can do is cross my fingers and hope he ends up getting what he wants, because he's the kind of guy who should be in our Army. He really wants to be there. He wants to serve his country. And we live in a land where most people don't. So God bless him, and God bless the dream that he's got. He has the dream of being an officer, of leading men and women in war. And he is also dreaming that in the next couple of years, there will be some good news, that maybe there will be a reversal of policy, and maybe he'll be able to go and join after he graduates from college. He really wants it, and he's holding on to that dream. The dream, by the way, has been crushed by the policy. It's been crushed by reality. And I guess I say God bless him because he's still holding on to the dream.
When you want something badly enough, you're gonna do anything to get it. And to me, doing anything is holding on to hope that something will change and that I'll be able to go in later on. And it means a lot to me to be able to be a part of the military and to serve my country and also to help protect it.
And you're talking about serving your country in a time of war. You're okay with that?
Yes.
I mean, I've been over there. It's when they start shooting at you, it gets real. You're okay with that?
Yes.
Some people would wonder why, especially the way you've been treated so far.
I mean, America hasn't always had the greatest track record, but I mean, it's changed with time, and so I mean, it's the same thing applies here. I mean, this is, in my opinion, it's very, very wrong, but I'm hopeful that we'll be able to realize and that this is wrong, and we'll be able to make it right again.